I'm recording this on November 22nd, 2000. This is an English version of my story, which was published in the Bulletin of our medical school in April 2000. The story entitled Why I Wanted to Study Medicine. I was born in a rather westernized Shanghai family. My father, Franklin K. Shore, Chinese name Xu Kuannian, he was a graduate of Tsinghua school. During those days, that was considered one of the best high school in China. After graduation, he came to United States and was admitted to Wisconsin University and studied civil engineering. He received a bachelor degree. During those days, he also learned French, and I understand he even worked as a translator during those years from French to English. He stayed in the United States a total of 8 years. My mother, Hilda Xia, Chinese name Xia Yaozhen, she's a graduate of this McTeer school in Shanghai. That school is again considered a very westernized school. Her English is better than her Chinese. She reads English much faster than she reads a Chinese book. My father is coming from the province of Anhui. He has 2 brothers. And what do they do? I really don't know. Very seldom he talk about his family history or his childhood history. But he was proud to tell us that his grandfather was some sort of like a general in the Qing dynasty. After he passed away, he was given another very good title, like a title of a general to control of 2 provinces. His grandmother was also given a title after she passed away as Yiping Furen. I don't know how to translate this. It's like wife of a governor, I guess. My father speaks Mandarin, but the Mandarin is not typical of Beijingese. That's a little bit different. My mother is from Zhejiang province, Ningbo. She's from Ningbo. Ningbo is where Chiang Kai-shek is from. She speaks Shanghainese with very strong Ningbo accent. So 2 of them speak their own dialect, very different, but they manage to communicate. The only time when they were fighting then, they used English to scream at each other. So when I was very young, I already learned how to say the bad words to yell at other people. Now, how did my father got interested about my mother? I thought maybe after he came back from United States, he learned that my mother has a very outstanding, prominent family because her uncle, Wang Zhenting, he was the foreign minister of China, and also he was once a ambassador in the United States from China. Or else they were introduced to each other by this Wang Zhenting sisters. I and my brother, we speak Mandarin at home. However, we speak Shanghainese to our mother, and so I speak Mandarin to our father. Our parents did love music. My father took voice lessons when he was in the United States. He sang baritone. My mother played piano well, and she sang alto. When I was young, I remember two of them were singing the music or sounds from showboat. That was in the 1930s. Especially, my father loved to sing Old Man River, and my mother liked to sing many other sounds from showboat, such as Make Believe, Bill, etc. One of the Chinese songs my father loved to sing was Yu Guang Qu. That means sound of a fishing girl. My father had some kind of hearing loss. His hearing was never good, but he sang with a big voice. Because his hearing wasn't very good, so many times he was off tune, so we thought it was very funny. I remember when I was about 4 to 5 years of age, we lived on one of the streets in Shanghai that was at the time called Zujie. That means it was one of the streets controlled by foreign government, either British or French. During that time, and the Japan already started invading China. I remember whenever we heard some gunfighting, we just hide under the desk or tables. Well, my father, during that time, because his patriotism, he wanted to build railroads, highways, bridges for China. So he went to build those civil engineer things. And my mother and my brother and myself, 3 of us, still stay in Shanghai. Then, after several months, he came back to Shanghai to get all 3 of us to go with him because the war was getting much intense. And I remember we were going to Kunming in Vietnam province because my father had to build one of the a railroad. It's called Xu Kun Tielu, and they went through Saigon. And there was one memory that I still remember. That was because my mother was very nearsighted. He wore very thick lenses, and her lens was broken. So my father had to try to get new glasses for my mother in Saigon, and they all spoke French. So my father was able to use his French to try to get the lenses for my mother. Well, she really needed glass, otherwise she couldn't see anything. When we got to Kunming, and we first lived in a city, but then air raid happened so often, and so it's very unsafe, so we moved to the country. But in the country, there was no school, no elementary school, so my mother had to do the home schooling for myself and my brother. So every morning we had classes from my mother, and afternoon we just play. Well, because my mother's Chinese wasn't that good, so we never had any Chinese composition when I was a child. After my father finished his mission in Kunming, we moved to Sichuan, a place called Yongxian. It's a small city, and he was recruited to build a highway system for Sichuan. On the route to Yongxian, we have to pass Chongqing. That was the capital that time during the wartime for China. I guess because we couldn't find a appropriate hotel or some other reason, we stayed in our father's classmate's home. And Wu Guozhen, he happened to be the mayor of Chongqing, a very important person. And Chongqing had air raid almost every day, or even maybe twice a day, many times a day. So remember, there was air raid, so we were all called to get into one of these tunnels, or we call it Fangkongdong, or shelters. And in fact, I saw Madame Jiang Gaished. She was just about the time to go into the other tunnel. Then I remember Father, not necessarily this time, he told us, and his classmate had some very famous people. During those days, one of his classmates is General Sun Lillian. He graduated from Tsinghua school, and also he came to the United States and was admitted to the Virginia military academy. And he was one of the very well-known generals in Burma war during the Second World War. Well, we stayed in this Yongxian for about 2 years. I and my brother both were able to get into elementary school. I remember I really was not very interested in studying. Always interested just following my brother and 2 boys of the landlord. We just climbing trees, climbing walls, did all the voice activities. Then not too long, then my father accomplished his mission in Sichuan, and we had to move to another province in the west part of China as Gansu, and the city is called Tianshui, because he was assigned to build the last portion of this railroad. It's called Baotian Tielu. It's the last part of Longhai Tielu. Tianshui is a very old city. It's got old walls, and there was one of these wall with 4 doors on outside. Overall, Tianshui is a city with a lot of poor people, and they're very short of water. So whenever we use some water, the water was actually brought in by other people from far away, and even the dirty water we were told not to throw out because some other people still could use it. I remember that time, my age, it was just supposed to go to the 6th grade. So we were enlisted to go, my brothers go to the junior high school. I was going to the 6th grade. I remember I had to take some entrance exam just for myself. And there was a mathematic question. It's something like multiples or dividing, etc., etc. And ended up with, I still remember, it was like 400 multiple 0. And I said to myself, when 400 multiplied to 0, that means, nothing happens, so it should be 400. But it really should be 0. So my mathematics was not up to standard, but the teacher say, well, you just come in every weekend, so I could tutor you, maybe your mathematics could improve. In fact, just within a few months, my mathematics was getting pretty well, pretty good, in fact. Almost in the forefront of the class. And also remember, I was once told to write one day's diary. So I wrote down what did I do that day. Like I got up 6 o'clock, I left the house 6:30, I had my breakfast, blah 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 blah. A teacher said, "What kind of a diary is that?" So he didn't like my diary. Then I found out when you write your diary, You have to put in your thoughts. You have to make some description, make it very interesting. Well, when I graduated from elementary school, my grade wasn't that bad. I was actually guaranteed to go to the junior high school. And I thought, since I was guaranteed to get admitted to the junior high school, all I have to do is show up on the day when the school start its classes. I didn't realize even for those students who was guaranteed to go to the high school, they also must show up certain day. Otherwise, that kind of guarantee has lost its effect. So then, by the day I went to register, I found out I was no longer qualified to be admitted to the junior high school. I was really upset. I started to cry, and I said, my God, I had to wait another year so then to get into the junior high school. Well, then I found I was fortunate the junior high school, because they didn't have enough students, they were going to hold another entrance exam. So I took the exam, and I was surprised to find myself, I got the number 1 for this time exam. Well, I always thought I was kind of stupid, because when I was young, I just couldn't understand what 1 out of 4 means. And my father had to explain to me many times, and I just didn't understand it. So finally, what he did, we had to fold a piece of paper into 4, and then torn down one portion, so that's 1 out of 4. You see, I was really kind of dumb. I remember when I was in a junior high school, because during the wartime, the financial situation is very, very bad. My father's income was really not enough for us to maintain a good life. So my mother thought she should go to work. One thing she could do is to teach English. But her Mandarin is really bad, because her Mandarin is just Shanghainese. So before she went to apply for this job, we all helped her, tried to help her to improve her Mandarin. But no matter how she tried, she still spoke with a Mandarin with a very strong Shanghainese accent. All she knows how to say is 你们,我们,他们. That's you guys, we, and they. But everyone has a mun. Mun is also the same word for a door, so we just laughed at her Chinese Mandarin. I remember when she was teaching English, she really tried very hard. She also got a very high critiques from one of these inspector coming from the province of Gansu. But because she had rheumatic heart disease, she got sick very often. She had rheumatic fever when she was a teenager. Following that, maybe 2 of her heart valves were damaged. Ever since she was a teenager, she started to take digitalis. This is one of the medication to help the heart to function. And when she got married, she was told by her physician not to have any children, because to have a labor delivery may be dangerous to her life. But she got pregnant first, and she didn't consider termination, so my brother was born. Then she was again warned that she shouldn't get pregnant again. But she got pregnant, and she did not want to have abortion. So I was born. Otherwise, I won't have any story to tell you guys. So she took the teaching job in this junior high school in Yongxian. But Yongxian is about 5 miles away from where we live, or maybe at least 2 miles away. She had to walk at least 40 minutes every day. So every now and then she would get sick, and she taught us English. Like there were 3 classes, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. She taught all these 3 classes English. Every now and then she would get sick. I would go there to tell people that Teacher Xia is not coming. But all my friends or the classmates were really happy, because then they knew they didn't have to take any exam that day. But I should be very grateful to my mother for giving me some English lessons, basic English lessons. Even though my English still not that good, you guys could hear my English had problem. A lot of people just call me Teacher Xia's daughter. My grade in the school was pretty good, and I got very interested in geometry. I remember once the teacher got me to the platform and to test me whether I was able to solve a problem for geometry. It was a pretty complicated problem, but I was not intimidated. I was able to solve the problem. I remember walking down the platform very happy, very proud. I think one of the things I found out, I was a person with rather great courage. I wasn't afraid of too many things. I remember when I was 8th grade, and some boys just threw a big dead rat at me, and I just scooped down, picked up the rat, and threw it back to them. I also remember that my mother had a very thick English textbook in pediatrics. This book was given to her by her brother-in-law. Her brother-in-law was an internist. Unfortunately, he died young of tuberculosis. So whenever we kids were sick, he would read that books and try to figure out whether we were very sick or not very sick, or what kind of illness we had. And when I was in a junior high school, we also had 2 experiences. They have something to do with my intention to study medicine. There was one time, one of my mother's best friend was going to have a baby. That was her 5th child. So my mother volunteered to help, and she in fact took me along with her. And so I watched the birth of the child, and even though it's very painful to go through the process, the labor pain, but once the baby came out, everybody was so excited. Nobody will remember the pain from the labor. And also, I had experience to peek through a hole because somebody had acute appendicitis in this hospital close to where we live, on Railroad Hospital. And I remember seeing the patients, the doctor took the intestine out from the patients and then put them back. I thought it's very exciting. I wasn't afraid at all. Well, when I was in 8th grade, and the Second World War got to be very intense. In fact, Japanese soldiers were actually closing to Sichuan. It's in Dusan, in Guizhou province. And during those days, then there were some big movement for young people to volunteer to go to the military. So because actually many of our male boy students in my class, they were much older than I. They were like 17 or 18 years of age. So they just volunteered to go into the army to help the war. I remember we girls just went to say goodbye to these boys, and I really didn't know how many of them came back alive. In 1945, August 15, that's the day I remembered we just doing their summer vacation, and that night some neighbor came to tell us that Japan has surrendered because they have a shortwave radio. They were able to get this news. I will always remember that evening and this good news, because Japanese have invaded China, have killed millions of Chinese people. They changed our life of my parents, or my life, and I thought maybe that evening our fate will be changed. We were going to get much better life, and my mother said we have to go back to Shanghai. But then during that time we didn't have enough saving. We didn't have enough travel expenses to go back to China. So my mother says she will really try to save money. Well, my brother then, he's only 1 year older than I. He was in this different high school, but their high school is made of most of the students are sort of like refugee Liuwangshis, and they have no parents to support them. So they said they will really have to go back to where they come from. But so my brother decided to also to go back to where my father's come from. As he decided to go to the province Anhui, even though he's never been there before. I was surprised my parents didn't stop him, and he was riding a big truck. On the back of the truck, and he traveled with many strangers. He was only 15 years of age, and he was going to go through 1,000 miles, go to Anhui province. And during those days, we didn't have good communications, so it took us a long time to find out he was. He got there okay. He lived in one of my father's sister-in-law's house, and had a very difficult life. After 1 year, he decided then that was not a place that he wanted to stay. So again, by himself, he went to Beijing. It's on a boat, and somehow, I don't know exact the story. He didn't have to pay. He didn't have the real tickets for the ship, and he got there. He got into this one of the pretty well-known high school, boys' high schools called Yuyin Zhongxue. But he still has very severe financial problems, so he only was able to cornbread. Well, this separation lasted about 3 years. I consider my brother very close because we only have 2 kids in the family. We used to talk to each other a lot, and after he left, I just became by myself. I learned to speak to myself and played with a very simple kind of doll with no face. Well, after I graduated from the junior high school, I had to take the entrance exam to the senior high school. I got in, and also after I got in, I also participated in some extracurricular activities such as harmonicas, and I did a small role in one of the play. And after we finished 10th grade, my mother said now we could go back to Shanghai because she has saved enough money for us to go back to Shanghai. So we, my parents and myself, we took a big truck. We left Tianshui to Baoji. This is a city much bigger than Tianshui. I remember in Baoji, my mother bought me a sneaker. I never wore a sneaker in my life before, and this is a white sneaker. To me, it's a very good-looking sneaker. And before, I was just wearing shoes made of cloth. And then we went to the city Xi'an. Now, Xi'an is a large city. And we really become a rather country people. And in Xi'an, I was able to eat ice cream again. And we also went to a pretty well-known theater to watch movie. I remember the movie is San Francisco's earthquake, Golden Gate Bridge, something like that. Then we took Longhai Tielu from Xi'an to Luoyang, which is a very old city, very well-known city, and then Zhengzhou, and then Xuzhou. All these places we stayed in some very simple railroad houses or hotels. Then we took the Jinpu Tielu from Xuzhou to Nanjing. And Nanjing, they have this very famous salty ducks. It's called Nanjing Banya. We also went to this very well-known Xuanwu, the Lake Xuanwu. It's a big park, beautiful lake. I was very impressed. Then we took Jinpu Tielu from Nanjing to Shanghai. When we got to Shanghai, it was a very, very hot summer, I remember. And my uncle, my mother's youngest brother, I call him Xiao Juju. He came to welcome us, to pick us up. And he brought us several icy Coca-Cola. That was the first time I tasted Coca-Cola, and it really tastes wonderful. I could never forget that very happy moment. My mother had 2 older brothers and 3 younger brothers, and because my grandmother, her mother, died young, around 40s, died of breast cancer. Even though my mother was not oldest girl in the family, but she did try to take care of her 3 younger brothers when her mother died. And I know that after my parents got married, they were doing well. They had a 3-story house. And of course, the first floor is living room and dining room. The second floor is where my parents live, and my brother and I live. And the third floor had 2 bedrooms, and my 3 uncles, that's her 3 younger brothers, live. So when my parents and we arrived in Shanghai, my mother initially thought maybe live with my Uncle William, because he's the oldest of the 3 younger brothers, and he already got married. My mother's 2 older brothers, the oldest one was deaf, so had some problem, handicap. Second brother was not very close to her, so she didn't think we would be welcome in their house. Then somehow my this Uncle William didn't really want us to go live with him, and so then my parents said, well, we could live with the second younger brother that is Uncle. I forgot his English name. I think I just call him 四舅舅. He welcomed us to his apartment. He has just one living room, one bedroom, so we were living in his living room. And my youngest uncle, the 小舅舅, but he was single, but he was still staying in a dormitory, so that could not accommodate us. Not very long, I started to feel that most of my uncles, especially my mother's older uncle, brothers, and his Uncle William, they didn't really want to receive us, and they thought we were so poor, didn't think we were up to their standard. So-called Chinese, we, they really 看不起我们. So shortly after this, and we realized we must accomplish two things. Number one, my father must find a suitable, appropriate job. Number two, I must get into a good high school. My aunt, and they all say that whatever I learned from the junior high or high school in Tianshui, probably whatever I learned is not good enough to be able to compete with the students in Shanghai. So I should redo the 10th grade, so I'd be able to catch up. So then, because one of my this aunt, she graduated from this high school called Qingxing Yuzhong. It's high school sponsored by Presbyterian missionary school. And I went to register, and I took the entrance exam, and I was able to get in. In fact, my name was quite in the front. I don't remember exactly how front. So then my father had to find a job because his hearing is so bad. So it looked like he didn't even have any interview. So my this uncle, this 四舅舅, the uncle, we stay in his living room. He had some money, so he was able to help my father to buy a hearing aid. But still, my father couldn't find any suitable job in Shanghai. And then my number two uncle, the older uncle, he has some connections, I guess. He was able to find a job for my father to go to Taiwan to work for the sugar company, to be in charge of the railroad system in Taiwan for the sugar company. So my parents say, okay, then they go to Taiwan. They would leave me in Shanghai in this boarding school, and she had no problem, so I could continue to receive a good education. And this Qingxin Yuzhong is a boarding school, but they usually take the kids from Monday to Friday, but for the weekend the kids are supposed to go home. So now it's a problem now. So where did I go for the weekend? And my mother's older brother, the married brother, didn't really want me to go to their house. Uncle William said, well, I'm okay. They could take me in, but I have to stay with their servants, so-called to live in the servants' quarter. So my mother, after he heard that, she got very upset. She said, well, my daughter is not going to stay in your servants' quarter, so my daughter is not going to your house. At that time, my mother was able to find, she has a cousin In fact, it's not really a straight first cousin, second cousin, I believe. She lived in far away, not in Shanghai downtown. She lived in Hongkou. That's it's like the Bronx or Brooklyn outside Manhattan. She said she welcomed me to go to her house during the weekend. She has she has 4 children, all pretty close to my age, 2 girls, 2 boys. But I know that her family situation, financial situation, is not that great, but she really is a nice person. She welcomed me to go to stay with her, for the weekend. If I had to go to her house from my high school, I have to take changes twice, a bus and the electric train or 电车, so like a subway. And then the school starts. I was a freshman. I didn't know anyone. They have a uniform. It's a navy blue qipao, and I had 2 of these navy blue qipao. It's okay. It's not very pretty, but that's the only thing I have. So every day I wear them. So when other ones dirty, I wash them and I wash them. It didn't even need much ironing. I could wear them again. But the winter time, I didn't have an overcoat, and so we were wearing something underneath. I was able to keep warm, but Shanghai, because they have a very poor heating system, so it's getting to be very cold. For the first month of my high school in Shanghai, my parents were still in Shanghai, so I always wished that Friday would come soon so we could go to see my parents. Then one of these Sundays, finally, the bad news is there, and my parents going to go to Taiwan. I remember that Sunday, my younger uncle, I call Xiao Juju, took me to see them off on the boat. And all day, I remember I was so upset. My eyes were red all the time. The tears just came down. Cannot control it. I have never left my parents before. This is the first time here. I had to live in this big city, Shanghai, just like New York. And then the weekend I had to go to Hongkou, to the faraway house. So I feel really very bad. And after my parents left in the boat, I saw them off. And my uncle Xiao Juju took me to for a nice American style dinner. It was very wonderful food, but I couldn't eat. I had no appetite. I remember after he took me back to my high school, and there was the evening worship service, and there was a song. It's a 你孤单吗？真孤单吗？耶稣比你更孤单。This means, are you lonely? Are you feel lonesome? Jesus is more lonesome than you. I couldn't help myself. I just cried loud. I'm sorry, even now I still feel sad for that moment. After 2 weeks, then I find out that in the school there were several other students just like me. They had no home. They had to stay in the school the weekend. The school say if you just pay a little bit more fee for the food, you'll be able to stay. So I stayed in the school most of the weekends with these like 5 or 6 other students. In the beginning, then I was in this. I was assigned to stay in a big hall, about 15 beds. For the weekend, everybody else were gone. I was by myself in the big hall. I didn't have any fear. I handled okay. But the certain weekend, long weekend, or certain special vacation time, I had to go to my mother's cousin's house. I call her 小窝阿姨 and 小窝. She was very nice to me. She had other children, but whenever there's something goodies or some chocolate, something like that, she would divide into 5 portions. I get a portion too. Whenever they went out to see a movie, they would take me along. So I really very, very grateful to her. And then she found out I didn't have an overcoat and for the winter, so she made me a 短棉袄, those cotton wool,棉袄. So she was so nice to me. I could never pay back to her, but I was happy 30 years later I was able to find her in Nanjing. I brought a lot of stuff. I bought a whole duffel bag of cloths, and sweaters, etc., food. I left her money. She was very moved to see me. She was staying with her younger sister, the daughter's house. She's a pianist. She couldn't even speak much that time. I don't know. Maybe she was having problems speaking, but her tears came out when she saw me. And whatever I did that time, it just was not enough to pay her back. Okay, then later on, I was able to sponsor 3 of her grandchildren to come to United States. That's only a small token of paying back. Well, that year, because the winter vacation was very short, so my parents say I really shouldn't go back to Taiwan to reunite with them, so I stayed with Aunt Xiaowo. And during the Spring Festival, my Uncle William informed me that I was invited to have to spend the Spring Festival with them. I was really happy. I went to his house, and there were all my uncles were there. Very, very how do you say that? Very warm. A lot of fun. And then past the midnight, all my other uncle left, and I thought Uncle William would definitely, keep me there for that Chinese New Year. I was only 15, and it was so late to me. I don't think they will tell me to go back to my Aunt Xiaowo Hongkou. But to my surprise, Uncle William said to me, Yufan, that's my Chinese name, here's your car fare. You should go home now. I was so surprised. I said, okay, I go home. I have my own money. I don't need your money. So I left. And there was a very cold winter night. Well, because Uncle William lived in center of the Shanghai, like a Manhattan, and that was already past midnight, so the subway or the trains it did not run anymore. So I had to take bus to Waitan, that's on the sea area, and then have to take another bus to go to Hongkou. And it's very frightening experience. And of course, the bus didn't come very often. I had to wait for a long time. When I was waiting there, there were rascals come over to bump into me, try to touch me, and that's very frightening. When I got to Xiaowo's house, it's almost like 2 a.m. And during those days, there was I didn't have a key, didn't give out key. there's no electric bell, so I had to scream out very loud, asking to wake them up to come to open the door for me. They were so surprised that I returned. They thought definitely, I would stay in my Uncle William's house. And also because there was no telephone that's fine, I couldn't call them, so or else I couldn't wake them up after midnight. So with this experience, terrible experience, I realized people only like you when are you rich, when they have something they could use you, when they're useless, when you're poor, nobody wants you. So you must depend on yourself. So I swear to myself, I have to learn something. I have to depend on myself when I grow up. I must have a special knowledge or something I could do nobody else could, something like that, so I could depend on myself. The winter of 1948, the Civil War of China got to be very intense. Communist China had already took over Xizhou. That time, my youngest uncle, I must reunite with my parents, go to Taiwan. So that time, he bought a boat ticket for me to get on this boat, and it was a ticket only in the basement sort of the boat with hundreds of people staying at this on just a place to sleep, and it was very strange. I was arranged to have this bed right next to Professor Ye's wife and his daughter. Professor Ye later was one of our professors in pathology. Also, he is a well-beloved professor. Okay, then I went to Taiwan, and then I got into normal high school, the high school affiliated with the normal University of Taiwan, and that 1.5 years I had a very good time, and that's a boys and girls on in the same class, and we just played together, and whenever the boys play basketball with other classes, we just go what do you call it, la la dui. And also I remember I was in charge of the music program of our class, because we thought we wanted to get number 1 of the high school, so we had people doing solos and duet, quartet, double quartet, so we did get number 1 because our total score is very high. Then we got to the 12th grade, and I just knew I had to get into National Taiwan University, but I didn't know what should I study, because my father is civil engineer, my brother is also studying civil engineer, and I thought I was doing okay in mathematics or chemistry or physics, so maybe I should do something from that aspect. So I asked my brother, what should I study? And he said there are 3 good professions for women. One is to be a teacher, second is to be a nurse, third is to be a physician. So I said, out of those 3, I think to be a physician is better, because it's a profession of independence. You don't have to depend on anybody else. If you're a physician, you could do a solo practice. You could work in the medical school, do anything you like. But then I look at this medical school program in Taiwan University. It's a 7-year program. I said, my goodness, it takes 7 years. After I graduate, I will be 25. Maybe that's kind of too old to find a right person to get married. But then I say, well, I think I'm going to depend on myself, so it doesn't really matter. I stay single, I stay married. So I thought, okay, I still study medicine. Then I studied very, very hard in that year because I really wanted to get into Taiwan University. And during the graduation examination and when the ceremony, I was surprised I got an award because I was number 2 for the final exam. My father was very proud of me. Then I was going to take entrance exam to get in Taida. I remember that that first day there was subject was Chinese and English. I thought I did okay, but not very good. But the second day, the first subject was mathematics, and there was one problem I couldn't solve. I should have solved because I just made a boo-boo. And instead of A over B, I wrote B over A, and so the answer was wrong. And by the time I realized there was a mistake, I didn't really have room on my paper to correct it, nor I had the time, so I was really upset. And because of this, I thought maybe I really couldn't get into the medical school. But fortunately, the next subject is chemistry and physics and biology. I did very well. In fact, I got over 90% correct. Anyway, I said to myself, I did my best. It wasn't as good as I expected. But what can I do? Let's see what happened. So after several weeks, one of these evening, and they said, well, they have this announcement, Fabang, because you have to have all your names on the wall. So my brother took me, we used a flashlight to try to look for my name. And I was so surprised to see my name was in there. In fact, I was a number 10 out of the 70 they took for the medical school. But I really couldn't believe that's me, because I said to my mother, I think they could have somebody else with the same name. So let's wait till they send out a notice. If I receive the notice, then I know that's me because I live in this right address. So that's how I started to be a medical student. Well, everybody else may have a very good reason to study medicine, just like people think. They all wanted to help the world, to cure patients. But I guess one of my major reasons is that I only want to save myself. I want to make sure I don't have to depend on other people. But I did do some good for my parents during my clinical years, and my profession was very helpful for my father's asthma. Many times I didn't sleep, and just to try to take care of him, I found out, what medication, what injections good for him, is what kind of situation. So he didn't have to stay in the hospital all the time. My mother's ailment also need my help, and I was able to invite some of the cardiologists came to my house to examine my mother, to give the proper advice. So in the last few years, I thought my being a medical student was very helpful to my parents. When we live in Taiwan, our financial situation, even though it's a little bit better than when during the wartime, but still not very good. So my mother raised a lot of lichen chickens and tried to sell the eggs, try to help out the financial situation. When I was in the clinical years, we had to buy some English textbook. During those days, I think it's really expensive. Each book would cost about $20. So my mother had to sell her gold rings. So I bought 2 textbooks and 1 stethoscope. Finally, I graduated from medical school. After graduate first year, I took a residency in the psychiatry department. And that year really helped me to get mature because for myself, and then I came to this country, started as an intern in Houston. Then I chose to be a pediatrician. And who would have imagined that later I became a medical geneticist. And nobody would ever imagine I would got into this cytogenetics and prenatal diagnosis field and did some of my clinical research and made some contribution. I was promoted to a full professor at the age of 43. And later on, I was recruited to be the director of a prenatal diagnosis program for the entire New York City. Also, at the same time, I hold a professorship in pediatrics for New York University School of Medicine. Within 35 years, that is from 1965 to 2000, I had 134 publications. I really believe if I didn't have that experience in Shanghai, I probably most likely would not study medicine. I thank fate and God's arrangement. I should thank the National Taidao University Medical School, educate me, let me complete my education, and United States give me the opportunities to get into this specialty. And as for all these reasons, they made it possible for me to make some contribution in my field.